Credo che possiamo cominciare. Ok, possiamo cominciare. Grazie, benvenuti a questo incontro con uno dei grandi registi contemporanei, AMOS GITAI, che ringraziamo di essere qui. Benvenuto. Un grande regista, anche un grande intellettuale, che if more you can use the or I can...
No, but I
okay.
understand.
Ok. D'accordo, allora così tenteremo, è anche multilingue, mentre parla inglese, francese
Un
pochino italiano, perché ha lavorato anche molto in Italia. E Amos Gitai, come molti di voi sanno, ha anche una formazione eclettica, ha una formazione, nasce come è figlio di un architetto e ha studiato architettura. Ieri sera, yesterday night, you told me I'm just an architect. So what did you mean by that? Are you still an architect in your work?
So, first of all, Emiliano, thank you for your kind words. Also, I'm happy that my friend Nicola is here. And
Nicola Mazzanti, Cineteca Royale du Belgique. Just for perché we are on streaming, so the audience.
He said that now I had to come to his own town to see him, so I'm happy to see you, Nicola. And so thank you for the Cinema Retrovato for inviting me, Gianluca, and all your great team of cooperative people, so it's a pleasure. I'm here just for a couple of days, and then I will go on Sunday to Haifa, my hometown, and to work in the little museum that I created on architecture. So, Emiliano, in some way it's connected to your question. No, I often say that I'm an architect, and you know, the way I sign some text that I write, I say, Amos Gitai, architect, film builder, bâtisseur de film. And I think that I was supposed to be an architect because my father, as you mentioned, was formed at the Bauhaus. He was a student of Mies van der Rohe of Kandinsky, and I was supposed to follow him. He passed away. He died more than 50 years ago. When he died, I was a soldier, like most of my countrymen, and I was 19. And since when I finished my military service, I did not know what to do, like many young people don't. I said I'll take the profession of my father, and I studied first in the Technion. I'm a diploma architect, if you want to. I'm authorized to design a house, if you want. And then I went and I did a PhD in Berkeley in architecture. So altogether, I spent 9 years, which is a long period, to study architecture. When I finished this 9 years period, I did a movie, which is now 40 years old, which is called House, which is a documentary on the story of one house in Jerusalem, which was owned by a Palestinian gynecologist until the 1948 war. And after the war, the Israeli government installed the Tubul family from Kolom Bishar in Algeria. And later on, when I did the film 40 years ago, a very well-known economist took this house and decided to make a villa out of it. But in order to build a villa, he has to bring workers Palestinian workers from the refugee camps and stones from the mountains of Hebron. And so this documentary, in a way, traced the source of the almighty conflict. I have to say that 40 years later, I'm very, I think the film still says what it needs to say. So it's in a way, as a filmmaker, I'm very proud. As a citizen, I'm not very happy because I would have liked this almighty conflict to already be resolved. But this is a point, a shift in which I decided to become a filmmaker. Also, I decided to leave architecture when in 1973 I was a student of architecture. I was called to do reserve service in the army. There was the Yom Kippur War, and I was in a helicopter trying to bring people from the battlefields to the hospitals. But my co-pilot, which was roughly the distance between Nicola and me, was decapitated by a missile that the Syrians shot into my helicopter.
Excuse me for interrupting, but j'ai l'impression que vous êtes très lié à votre premier film, à Rome. Vous en parlez beaucoup. Et vous avez tourné 2 autres films sur le même sujet au cours des années.
I will get to it. I'm just explaining how I gradually left architecture and became filmmaker. So I think one is, you may say, a traumatic experience during the war, which I felt that architecture is a bit too formal exercise, and I wanted to touch exposed nerve of my country, Israel, which I'm very attached to, but I'm also critical. And the other one, so this is one. The other one that I did a movie with all the good intention, and the film was censored. So at this crossroad, and my dear Emiliano, that's a point that I had to decide if I become a filmmaker or I'm just an architect, and it's not such a big deal. I consider the film is censored, so it's not so big. And I decided to go and defend this film. So I think it's a point of departure which led me to some other places. And I think that when you, and all filmmakers know that when at some point when you have to go and defend your work, it also shapes you and your character as a filmmaker, your attitude, the ethics of this profession, and so on.
So that's why. And you said you're an architect and that your movies are un cantiere. But they're also an archive in a way. We are in a festival connected with film archives. And so I think there's something like a work in progress through all your films, but also a way of a kind of memory storage or going back to memory, to the past in each film. I think these 2 aspects, these 2 issues are strictly connected. You're always working again on your obsessions, on your subjects. And at the same time, you are going back to something, making it alive again. So can you say something about these 2 issues, the archive or memory and the work in progress, il cantiere?
No, you know, since I never spent even 1 hour in a film school, but I spent 9 years in architecture schools. So I think that I love the experience of transposing something that you know in one discipline into another. And you have to invent, discover. And so also I think that my work is at the same time also a civic gesture. So since it's a civic gesture, it means that I want to speak about destinies of people of my country, which deserves to be spoken about. And so it is a very particular, subjective kind of cinema. And anyway, this is also the films that I like from other filmmakers. Essentially, I like even filmmakers, I know it's a bit sacrilege to say it here, I like filmmakers more than I like films. So when I like a certain filmmaker, I will follow what he wants to tell me. He wants to share some his observation about his country. He wants to expose something that I don't know. So I think that that's something that I saw a lot of revelation when I saw, let's say, films by Ritvi Gatak, by Glauber Rocha, by, you know, films which mentioning filmmakers which are not always climbing on the red carpets of Cannes, but I understood something about Brazil, I understood something about India. So I like when a thinker, but that cinema is medium of expression, use it. And it's true that on some of the documentaries, like House, I did 3 films. So I did the first one was 1980, then I did the second version, which was certain visit to the same house 18 years later, and another visit in a film which is called News from Home, News from House, 25 years later. So in a way, in a documentary, I think that you can see the transformation, the evolution of the object.
And tu hai vissuto in molti paesi, in molte città, hai studiato a Berkeley, hai vissuto a Parigi e alcuni tuoi film, Esther, Berlin, Jerusalem, sono nati a Parigi. Hai lavorato anche in Italia, soprattutto in spettacoli teatrali, e ovviamente in Israele, ma in tante città di Israele. Ecco, che cosa hai preso da ognuno dagli Stati Uniti, nel bene e nel male, dalla Francia, nel tuo cinema, queste varie, dalla tua formazione a Berkeley a Parigi e il fatto di essere appunto un israeliano comunque cosmopolita?
You know, I like the definition of cosmopolitan, and I always say that, you know, Stalin accused the Jews of being cosmopolitan. I think it's a compliment. Let's be cosmopolitan. We don't want only good things for our own culture. We want also for other cultures. I did films like Ananas, Pineapple in the Philippines, and so on. I think that the issue is not just about the subject, because I think that when we do a film about a cause or a thematic that we like, we have to be careful not to be indoctrinated or not to be didactic, and we have to allow contradictions. You know, we have to respect contradictions also of people, and we have to treat even people that we don't agree with, that don't come from our culture. So this is always a big challenge. But you know, I once, also 40 years ago, I interviewed Sol Bello, and Sol Bello told me, and I liked it, he said that the reason that the Jews still exist is they don't put everything in the same basket. So if one branch is eliminated, there will be others. And to go back to the question you asked me about archive, I decided to disperse my archive, you know. So part of it is in Jerusalem, another part is in Paris, another part is in Stanford, another part. So in a way, if you want to know the ensemble of the work, it is dispersed. It's not everything in the same place.
By your archive, you mean your screenplays, the photos, documents of your family archive, letters from your parents?
No, for instance, now there is a very big exhibition at the Bibliothèque Nationale at the National Library in Paris, because I gave them all the archive of the work I did on the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, who was a prime minister, was assassinated 25 years ago in November 95. And when I give an archive, for instance, when I give the archive of Rabin, I give, first of all, the point of departure, which is a public event in the public domain. It's not my creation, you know. So all the incitation against him, calling him a collaborator, a traitor. So this is the raw material, you can say. This is not me. I'm just. So I gave all of that to the Bibliothèque Nationale. I gave them 30,000 items. And then I give also all the scenarios that we wrote, and so the way that you sculpt inside the mass of archive, how do you sculpt a narrative? So you can see all the temptation, the success and the failures of the frustrations and the achievements, because I think that now it's good to show show process, not just to show the big achievements, to show how when we are confronted with a subject, we want to try to find a sense in it. Then there is all the rushes. So, and then there is obviously the final film, the final mix, and so on. So if you are a researcher, you can put questions. I like, I think that the legacy of the Jews that I like is that it's a culture which is in the dialectics of constantly putting questions, and I like it. I think it's a good heritage. So somebody can come and say, listen, Amos, it's very kind, but there is a scene 16 that you wrote with Marie-José, and finally you didn't shoot it. Okay. Or you shot a certain scene, you displaced it. It's not scene number 3, now it's scene 50, and it changed the meaning. Let's go to the challenge. Let's be open about the procedure in which we do, because as you know, cinema, like music, is different than painting or literature. When you have a book, you can read this page. If you want, you go back. You go to the other page. You also establish the rhythm of the perception. You can read this page 5 times until you get it. Then you go to another. Cinema, like music, the procedure and the way of advancing is given by the director. In a way, it's a more authoritarian object. When you listen to music, you listen from the beginning to the end, the variations, the repetition, and so on. The cinema is similar. But let's say when you look at the painting, you can look at it a different way. You can go back, you can go and visit it again, and so on. So you have, in a way, to work almost sometimes against the nature of this authoritarian nature of cinema, and especially when you do adaptation of literary works, I like to make it even sometimes more abstract than the original intention of the writer. For instance, we did adaptation of a very good writer, Aaron Appelfeld. And the dialogue with Aaron Appelfeld was wonderful because he was intelligent, Because I told him, you don't need illustration for your book, because the book is very strong. So if I do, it's a dialogue between 2 mediums, and you will see it. So anyway, we jump to many subjects, but as you know, because you are holding this little book, I did a series of conferences at the Collège de France in Paris, and I spoke about some of these questions.
Un bellissimo, dico per il pubblico in sala, una lezione inaugurale al Collège de France. C'était la première fois pour un réalisateur, ils l'ont dit.
Depuis 1530.
Questo libretto comincia con una frase. Dice che per fare il cinema ci vuole tempo, il lui faut du temps car il s'agit d'umaniser l'autre. Ecco, io penso che sia molto importante. Can you explain this?
Because I called my inaugural speech of the Collège de France the camera as a fetish filming the Middle East. And obviously the Middle East is one of the regions in the world which is the most bombarded by conceptions, misconceptions of the other. People come to think about this region already with very strong preconceived ideas. And some of them are right, but some of them are wrong. And you have to explain to them the contradiction, the complexity of this region through cinema. So how do you humanize the other? So some of it is actually about rhythm, because we are now in a generation of a kind of a Speedy Gonzales montage, which doesn't allow us time to think. And sometimes even the most subversive gesture that you do is not even about the content, it's about the rhythm. You say to your spectators, look with me and think while you look. I will give you some situations with the contradictions. Then you can make up your minds. Because our very strong medium, which is cinema, is suffering by the very strong commercial pressure. A lot of people talked about it, but also by the fact that we treat the spectator as a consumer. So we push consumer goods. I prefer to have relations with a spectator who is an interpreter. So in order to do interpretation, you need space, you know. So it's also a question about rhythm.
Speaking of that, a lot of you're famous for your long takes, but I think that in a certain way, your way of filming is connected with the fact that you are filming in Middle East, because I've always seen your long takes as something that, of course, takes its time and allows the audience to think, but also a movement through the borders. Because a long take, if you are in a fragmented space, in a space that is scattered, if you film it with a long take, an image fixe, un mouvement de caméra, you are doing something which gives back a not fragmented reality, a not fragmented world, a not fragmented Middle East to the audience. I always thought about a sort of connection between the things you are filming and your and the strength of your long takes. But of course, there are a lot of other issues about long takes. There is a whole chapter about your style in this this book. Can you? Because the first AMOS GITAI is also a way is his long takes.
No, you know, people in general think that the most important thing is what you include in the film, but also what is very important is what you exclude from the film. This is a gesture of eliminating things, and when you want to share with the spectator both the spatial complexity and the rhythm of perceiving it, it's the plan séquence, the sequence shot, is the, and obviously in that sense it's really helped me that I was formed as an architect, because I like to start with situating figures in landscape or in, and actually, you know, when I started, as I mentioned, I started by doing a documentary. And the first fiction films I did, I have to be honest and say that I was not so interested in talking to actors, because I thought that basically it's placing text in landscape. And only after some films, when at some point I played myself in one of my films, I don't think I'm the best actor of this film, but when I played myself, I had a feeling that at this point I started to understand the dilemmas of the actors. Now I'm very interested to speak to them. But my methodology is also my own. You know, I don't like to do casting of the almighty director with his sunglasses and the fearful actors coming to see him. Because I think that sometimes you meet very talented people, but they're a bit shy. So why scare them? I mean, you will not get some precise perception of what they can do, you know. You can talk to them, you can decide you want to work or not. And so at this point, when I do auditions, I like to share a cup of coffee with somebody and not just repeating mechanically the text and take the decision. But this I understood later on, you know. So also I have to say that some of the great actresses and actors taught me a lot of things. I had the great pleasure to work with Jean Moreau, with Pina Bausch, did the choreography of one of the scenes of my films. So Samuel Fuller, Shigula, Natalie Portman, Binoche, Israeli-Palestinian actress Yael Bekassis, etc., etc. So I like to learn from them. In a way, I say that I like to be a bit even ignorant of this, because I like to discover. So when I meet somebody I don't know completely, I come with a kind of an open mind to see what this person can contribute to the film. And I think it's true, not just about acting, but also I had the great pleasure to work with wonderful cinematographers, Henri Alcan, Renato Berta, Caroline Champeltier, Eric Gauthier, and so on. So it's always a composition of a dialogue between people who come from many places, and I think that I really learned from all of them, and I'm still learning. I mean, Jeanne Moreau told me something that I always like to quote when I worked with her, and she said, you know, Amos, when I decide if I will do a film or a play, is because I can learn something I don't know already. And this is really different, because I know a lot of people who like to do again and again what they know. But so each time that I proposed to her something, you would go to her little apartment in Paris. It was full of books on the subject, and she wanted to use it almost like a pretext, almost like a mathematician who is putting a question in space, and he has to find the equation, you know. So for me, each film is a kind of putting this question in space and trying to respond to it in a cinematic way.
Speaking of actors, do you remember a particular moment, a scene of your
No, yesterday you wanted me to speak about Natalie Portman, so...
Yeah, so there's something that changed your plans, a moment when an actor or an actress broke your ideas or added something? Or
no, but I think that, you know, you have to be really fair. Let's say there is this opening scene of this film, Free Zone, which was shown in Cannes, and Natalie Portman is basically sitting in a car, and we look at her face for almost 10 minutes. And at some point she's crying, and the range of expression, she was not very happy, because the New York Times wrote that these 10 minutes she did was better than all the trilogy of Star Wars. So
which is true.
But to be honest, so I can explain why this scene was strong. You know, the car is placed, we hardly see it, in the esplanade of the Mur de Lamentation, the Wailing Wall of Jerusalem. So it's a very charged space. The day was kind of melancholic, a bit drizzling rain, so kind of soft, you know. She's sitting in this car. So all these components, when you direct the scenes, some components don't come from you. It's like the beautiful Latin phrase, carpe diem, you know, which is seize the moment. Basically, your work is to be very alert, very sharp, and to integrate elements which are not always coming from you. So they come from your co-writer, they come from the research, they come from the actor, they come from a driver, they can come from anywhere. But you have to be very focused and to seize the moment and to find a way to integrate it. So this was a perfect moment. And basically, she was sitting there in this car, and I told her the sentences that I want her to say. And actually, Jean-Michel Frodon kept a version for the Cahiers de Cinéma with my instructions when she's answering me. And maybe it's even on the internet still. And so I say to her, please say this and this. And she, because she's a very opinionated person, she always changes what I tell her. But actually what she says is better of what my proposition was, you know. Because she's American, she knows the language and so on. So just to give you as a prototype, this is, you have to be, so you have to, in some way, to keep an overview of what is your general project. What do you want to tell us? And then to be, at the same time, going very much into details which happen while you do the filming. So I think that all films have these two characteristics.
And your films always have wonderful actors and actresses, and there are wonderful female characters in almost all your films. La plupart de votre film, and the last one too, or Jalila, or Frizo, but oh, Esther, so something that one of the first thing, more than the long takes, that the audience can notice watching your films. Can you say something about your female characters and their importance in your films? Because it's one of the few things you don't talk about in this wonderful book. So
no, but
maybe I found something to add.
No, you know, you should read the letters of my mother.
Ah, okay. It's not a female character. It's,
no, because
there is a female character in your book, too.
Yes, no, because she first of all they co-produced me. She was already more than 40 years old, so she was, you know, she kind of I spoke to her a lot, and she was a modern, not religious figure, and critical. So she's not like what you would say a caricature of a Jewish mother. You, Bubale, my son, you are the best, you are the most. No, she always challenged me, and I think she inspired a lot of, and she was a feminist. You know, she wanted to defend rights of women. And so I think that a lot, and actually, you know, the film which is the maybe the most tough about this subject, Promised Land, about the traffic of women into the Middle East for prostitution from East Europe. The last day of the shooting, symbolically, was the day she died. You know, so I think that obviously she's a central figure. And in this interest of me to shape different roles for great actresses, you know, and I really recommend it. It's translated by Bompiani in Italian and by Gallimard in France. Now it's translated by Primo Levi Foundation in English. It's even in Portuguese. Her name is Efratia. And the book will tell you something about the parcours. She was born in Israel, in Palestine, in 1909. And when she was 18, she felt that it's provincial. So with two other girls, they went to Vienna to meet Freud. So they were kind of fearless, you know. They were curious girls, fearless, and I think that this attitude that I also, some people say that I'm not afraid, even if Mr. Netanyahu does not necessarily like what I have to say about him and so on. I think it also she has a part in it. You know.
And I don't know if we can talk about that, but your next film too will be about a woman. Can we say something?
But I'm always cautious about talking about next films. Let's see, you know. I'll be happy to come back to Bologna to see Nicola and some other friends and speak about it, you know. But maybe if some people have questions, we can also talk.
Maybe if people have questions.
Apparently everything was clear.
Yesterday, a strange name came up from our discussion. It was Ivan Illich. I came back to this because there is a school dedicated to Ivan Illich here in Bologna, I think,
Really?
a Scuola Ivan Illich. I didn't
No,
know you knew
I
him.
met him. I went to see him in Cuernavaca in Mexico, and I thought he was great. No, but in general, you know, my period in Berkeley was fantastic. I learned
Feyerabend. There are lots of
Feyerabend,
incredible
philosophy
names.
of science, Marxist economy, Ivan Illich. You know, it's anarchic way of thinking. So I think that it's because people would say 9 years you studied and you are not an architect. I think it was really great. And also about aesthetics and the visual questions and so on. So I'm very satisfied. And also even what I'm spending a lot of time, because we are in a great film archive here, is about archive, about the conservation of memory through archives, and trying to deal with archives in a slightly different way. So it's not just which is very important, work of restoration, but keeping traces of the way that the projects start with, you know. And for instance, the work we did recently on the Rabin project in France was great. About what is the modern, the contemporary sense of an archive. So archive for me is not just conservation; it's also a proposition. Because memory is not only nostalgia. When I speak about my mother, even, or my father, it's not just because it's my parents, because I think that there is, in these kind of figures, there is a proposition to men, to women. And when I conserved the letters of my mother, or I did a very big work on conserving the drawings of my father when he designed some of the first kibbutzim, it's also a proposition about architecture which can be minimalist, simplistic, not kitsch, not just a show-off, not just narcissistic. So it's also a proposition by these figures and by creating a kind of an archive.
Well, nice words to hear here in
Yeah.
Bologna.
Yeah.
This link between archive and not conservation, but proposition,
Yeah.
which is, I think, more or less what we are.
No, conservation
attending.
obviously is important, but
There is no proposition without conservation, of course.
yes. No, but you know, the big problem, let's say now part of my archives, paper archive, are in Stanford. And it's very interesting because now, as you know, we have a gap of something like 20, 25 years that there are almost no paper traces. Everything is digital, you know. So we have to think differently. How do we deal with this mass of digital information? And when Stanford took 7 films that I did and created the archive, it's that dealing with the challenge. What do you do with the digital archives? You know, so there is an element of conservation because digital information is even more difficult to conserve than paper. So they have to deal with that, but they have all the money of Silicon Valley, so I'm not concerned about it. But also, how can you find ways of interpreting an archive when it is digital? So I think that all this issue about archive, I'm very interested. You know, what can it tell us beyond conservation, but also conservation, but what is the proposition? What can we do with it? And I think it's also the impact on the methodology of teaching, because film schools are becoming too formaté. And we see the results in cinema today. There is too much cliches of cinema being recycled. So I think that we have to, and I was teaching a couple of years ago in Columbia, in New York, the University of Columbia, so I tried to tell them about a methodology which opens up a subject but does not make hermetic proposition about the procedure, or that let's say the montage of film is becoming a kind of religion. No, you can do a lot of things. You know, look at a guy who is 90 years old, like Jean-Luc Godard, who is still experimenting. You know, so I think that we need to renovate and to re-challenge this incredible medium which is cinema. You know, and not close it into some sort of closed formats, because otherwise it's becoming really boring and repetitious, and we have to challenge it, to say, so when I was teaching in Columbia, in New York, I made some propositions, but I don't want to exhaust you, about methodology, archive methodology and so on.
No, we're not exhausted. We were very interested in, on the contrary, can you say something more about this?
No, I think that this kind of neoliberal idea that when you teach, everybody does his own project is a mistake. Because, you know, even when I was in Berkeley, I didn't only learn from Feyerabend, from Ivan Illich, I learned also from the other students, you know, because it was a very open-ended teaching. So let's say when I came to Columbia, they said, what do you want to do? I said, I'm against this kind of thing that everybody will do what they want, and then because you need to create a comparative base in order to learn. So I came with basically with the New York Times of the day. I put it on the table. I had two groups of really brilliant guys and girls. And I said, okay, let's look together. Okay, there is an article here about the wall that Trump wants to build with Mexico. Okay. There is another article about the disappearance of the glaciers in the Himalaya. There is another article about the violence in the subway. Let's choose together a subject, a theme. But once we choose it, everybody has to deal with this theme. So, but I don't want to indoctrinate. You can even make a film that you support the wall between America and Mexico. I don't want to brainwash you. I am against the Michael Moore system that pushes you by force an idea, because I think it's counterproductive. You have to work as thinkers, not as manipulators. So choose a theme, but from the moment you choose, everybody is. Then I don't want to push the genre. You can do a documentary, you can do animation, you can do fiction. And so the results were fantastic. They still bother me by sending me emails, these students, and I cannot always answer them. So for instance, I'll give an example. On the group of the glaciers, came to me one of the American women, student from Los Angeles, and she said, I have to be frank with you, I cannot do a film about glaciers. So I said, why not? She said, I'll tell you a story. You know, I had an aunt. At one point, she went to her parking in a place in Los Angeles, and she was raped and murdered in the parking. My father, which is the brother of this aunt, says this woman, this is a weight on his shoulder all his life, and now he is going to meet the killer in the prison. And he wants me to make a film about that, so I will not be able to do something about the glacier. Okay? So I told her, you know, first of all, it's very moving what you said. Secondly, it is about the glaciers. So she said, come on, are you joking? How is it about the glaciers, you know? I said, you know, because everybody has a similar argument. Let's say India will tell us, we cannot deal now with the problem of the glaciers because we have to feed 1.3 billion people, so it's a priority. The glaciers will wait. You have your aunt, and it's legitimate. This is more urgent. So make a film about how you cannot make a film about the glaciers because of this story, and it will count like a film about the glaciers. And the film is beautiful, what she did. So you see, you have to to really, and I think that, and then we spoke also about sequence shots and so on, but I think that we have to, and the amount of time that these students spent on this challenge was fantastic. The other professors started to complain that they don't do enough work for the other class, but that's not my problem, you know. So I think that you have to create methodologies which will re-challenge a young generation of filmmakers and tell them, come on, guys, go, do your work, do your research, invent things. This great medium of cinema need new inventions, the new attitude. Don't just copy the speed of editing. Don't listen to people who will tell you if you don't accelerate it, do something which is close to your heart, and so on. So I think that in each way, now we are also, because we're talking about archives, we're talking also about transmission. We're talking about memory, about what is the impact of a film or a painting on the reality. That's why I say I don't agree with Michael Moore, because I think that Michael Moore, anytime he intervened in politics, was completely counterproductive. Let's have, at the same time, a modest. I think that, you know, to do this role, you have to be contradictory. You have to be modest and ambitious. You know, you have to be patient and impatient. You have to have contradictory characters, both. In both. And also, you have to know that each project, and especially it's true about the Middle East, you know, I would not do maybe 10% of the film I did if I would wait for the perfect scenario and circumstances. My film Kippur, which was shot in a very small window, that there was almost a peace agreement between Israel and Syria. 1 year later, there was almost a war. That's it. I could not have shot it on the Golan. So when you have a good, semi-good circumstances, go to work. And to go back to architecture, you know, I like a lot the building that the Walter Gropius, from the Bauhaus, the building I recommend to you to go and see it in Dessau. So I'll give you as an example, because Walter Gropius is the creator of the Bauhaus. He was a liberal. He brought all these great artists, Paul Klee, Kandinsky, Albers, the great architects together in Weimar, which is, as you know, an important German city with great tradition of Goethe and everything. But when the Nazis took the municipal council of Weimar, he understood that he has to move his school. He chose a relatively unimportant city in East Germany called Dessau. He chose it because Dessau had the aluminum industry for airplanes, and he invented already the idea that in architecture, in order to bring light to building, you can make a facade which is not structural. So it's not like what you see in this beautiful building in Bologna, where the facade is carrying the roof. The facade was detached. And then it allowed to bring a lot of light and so on. So he built the school, the building of the school. But he understood that the political context of Germany is changing very fast, and that if he will start to scratch his head, he will not do it. He had 1 year to design it and build this masterpiece of modernity, and he did it. He understood. So when you act in this kind of civic cinema, you have to be aware of the delay, of the fact that not everybody is going to wait forever until you reach the perfect scenario and the best budget you can get. You have a certain circumstance that you can add, go and do it. Find inventive way to do it. And I think that I learned a lot from this, looking at this other discipline, which is architecture, that you can do great things, but be aware of the context. You're working in a certain context, you know. And as I said, a lot of the films I did would have not happened if there was a look for a perfection. And anyway, but this is something else. For me, beauty is about non-perfection. Perfection is something almost fascist, you know. It's authoritarian. And also I learned it when I studied architecture, because one of my teachers, he was a great collector of Muslim prayer tapis, rugs. And for us, the PhD students, he would hang 10 carpets. And for a full semester, we had to analyze formally the carpets, which was a great exercise, you know. So about symmetry and the composition of color and so on. And then he wanted us to choose which was the most beautiful of all these carpets. And mostly we always went for the one that had a little default. So let's say that the red color sometimes changed. Why? You can ask why. We say maybe the wool of this color ended and they had to go to another village, and then it was not exactly. So it gave it a kind of a grace against the absolute symmetries. And this, so beauty is about non-perfection in my mind. It's not about perfection. Also about people, you know. I think beauty in people is not about some sort of absolute perfection of body and so on. So I think that all these elements, and now I'm jumping from a subject to another, the context, the beauty, the definition of beauty and so on, they create an ensemble of thinking. And when the French, for a strange reason, chose me to be the first elected for Collège de France, it was a good occasion for me to make a synthesis of things that I've been thinking for 30 years. Because my daughter told me, listen, the Collège de France is something serious, so you might as well collect yourself and not just do a little Q&A in the Venice or Cannes Festival. And I really worked on it, and it was a good moment to make a summary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. C'è una domanda dal fondo.
Buonasera. Lei ha parlato prima della memoria e della necessità di conservare la memoria. Io volevo chiederle, visto premesso che non è possibile conservare tutto, forse sarebbe assurdo pensare di quello che è vecchio deve essere tutto conservato in qualche modo, che cosa pensa lei riguardo il cinema soprattutto che debba essere ricercato e conservato, e che cosa invece è il caso di non conservare, perché non merita di essere conservato. Quindi qual è per lei, diciamo, i motivi o l'area anche tematica che secondo lei si sta perdendo e si dovrebbe conservare? Grazie.
I mean, I don't want to make my own Vatican of what to preserve and what not, you know, so... and anyway, as I started to say, any choice will be non-perfect, and I think it's fine, you know. So I think that obviously it's people who make these decisions, you know, and we cannot go punctually. It's really a difficult question. I think that you're right to ask it, but I don't have a simple answer to it. I think that, you know, you follow the stream, you know, and as I said, I don't think that art or cinema changed the reality in a direct way. You know, it changed when people think or are sensitive to, and even that should not be the only consideration. You know, so. But you're absolutely right that we have too many things almost to conserve. So. You have the good answer as I have. You know.
C'è un'altra domanda forse? C'è una mano alzata?
do you think about all these platform screenings? If do you think cinema is cinema and you can see it whatever you want, or is better to have a?
I can't hear because of the mask. Maybe
Sorry.
you can just for a few seconds. Okay.
So, what do you think about all these platform screenings? Do you think is cinema whatever you want to see it, or
Streaming?
about streaming?
About streaming.
Streaming's platform. Netflix, movie,
I mean,
whatever.
everybody is debating it. It's probably will change the way that we perceive cinema, you know. And obviously, these almighty forms like Netflix and so on will change because people will get used to the fact that why go to cinema if they can watch it at home, you know. But it may also create a kind of a distinction between certain films that we see in festivals and museums and others that we see in streaming, you know. But it's again like the previous question. I think that the issue is that you need very innovative figures to figure this out, you know. I'll give an example. When my first film that Emiliano says that I speak too much about it, House, you know. So I was completely unknown. I did one film. And I remember that I went to a great guy, was the head of the Rotterdam Festival, Hubert Bals. And it was already a very short delay before the festival. It was 1 month before. Some friends brought me. I think I told it to Nicola, the story. And he found the time to sit and watch this film while everybody was shouting that he has to finish the catalog and he has other priorities. And he decided to show it in Rotterdam, to have it, to put money in subtitling and so on and so on. But it means that you need people of vision, who can, by intuition, because not everything is Cartesian, you know. So he had the intuition that he has to see this film, and in a way he started my work as a filmmaker, because he has so you are dependent also on the grace. I don't know if the word luck is good, but some component of it that you meet somebody who will stop everything and will say, actually, this guy, I never heard about him. He never did anything. I want to watch this film. Spend now 1 hour when everybody's shouting in the corridors and so on. And this apparently. No, I read an interesting article about all this artificial intelligence and so on. There is one thing that they did not manage, I'm not sure they will manage to program, which is spontaneity. That's very good that they will not manage to create it. So you need somebody, which we cannot program, that will say, I want to do that, I don't have an explanation. And as a filmmaker, it happened to me many times. You know, many times, and it's always a kind of an incredible surprise that you follow some sort of a strange intuition, and somehow it's the good solution. You know, so I think that we cannot find a real scholarly answer to these two questions. We need to, but it needs to develop individual characters. You know. So people who are not kind of on a Soviet mold, but they are obedient to Soviet, I'm saying in general, it's also capitalist, that they are obedient to a mold which is rigid. But they give themselves the right to go out from it. And I think that's very important in a mass culture. And the great text of that everybody quotes of Walter Benjamin, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, you know. So we need to have individual thinking against this grain. If you want, I sometimes say as a joke that when my mother, when I was 10 years old, went to London and left me 1 year in a kibbutz, on one hand it was a great experience, on the other hand, when I see a group of people agreeing about everything, I go to the other direction.
Grazie mille Amos Gitai. Il tempo a nostra disposizione è finito purtroppo, ma come dire, eravamo proprio in piena discussione. So thank you so much Amos, and grazie al pubblico che ci segue e quello che ci ha seguito appunto in streaming. Al prossimo appuntamento. Grazie ancora.